Welcome to the Manifested Podcast with Kathleen Cameron, a podcast dedicated to manifestation, law of attraction, and self-love for impact-driven entrepreneurs. My name is Tommy Collier, and I'll be your co-host, along with Kathleen Cameron, who is a rock star mom, an international best-selling author. She's an 8-figure coach, a highly sought-after speaker, teacher, trainer, and television star. Kathleen is Chief Wealth Creator, CEO, and founder of Diamond Academy, and she is the perfect guide to lead you down the path of attracting more love, more money, and more success into your life starting right now. Okay, here we are with episode 9, and we're going to talk about imagination today. How's it going, Kathleen?
I'm excited. This is one of my favorite topics.
Me too. Where do you want to start?
I just want to start by saying that imagination is your most powerful tool and asset. And if you really start to love it and harness it, you can literally manifest miracles, literally from your own thinking, from your own visualization. So today we'll talk about imagination, we'll talk about visualizations, and then hopefully at least just spark your interest. We're not going to be able to talk about the whole thing, the whole gamut of information and experience, but we can at least give you an intro into why imagination is one of the most integral parts of manifestation.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm. So where did you first learn this? Maybe let's start there. When did you first tap into the power of your imagination?
I love this question. Nobody's ever asked me this.
Okay, wow. Great.
I love this. So really interesting. I'll tell you, as a girl and then a woman, I have never, ever thought that I was creative. Okay. So I never thought I was creative. I never really used my imagination all that much after I was a little girl. I was somebody that really didn't play a lot of make-believe. I don't love acting. So you're never going to see me as an actor. Okay. So just prefacing that.
Unless you're playing you.
Pardon? Somebody will play me. You. Sure. Yeah, I love that. But I don't like pretending to be someone else. I don't love role play. Any sort of thing like that isn't something that I've ever really enjoyed or liked. And so using my imagination really wasn't something that I ever did. I do remember as a teenager, I used to lay in bed at night and I used to make up things. I used to make up dreams. I would lay there and I would think about what if this boy liked me? What would that be like? Little fun things like this. Or what if we went to Canada's Wonderland on the weekend? What would that be like? And what rides would we ride? And I would fall asleep creating these dreams. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know if everybody could do that. It was just something that I did. And then you become an adult. And that got replaced with worrying about all the things that I needed to do next day. It got replaced with replaying the fight that I had with my sister earlier that day. And so the dreaming stopped. But in September of 2019, when I first started to hear more about law of attraction, and I went on to that training with my first coach, she did a guided visualization. And I allowed myself to just do it, to just listen to her and to just do whatever she told me to do. And so she had me visualize my dream life. And I had never done that. What I had done before is Chris and I would have conversations of what would it be like if we won 20 million in the lottery? What would we do with it? And so then we would go up and we would say, oh, well, I would buy a house for my mom and buy a house for your mom and dad. And then we would buy ourselves a house here and there. And then we'd be like, okay, well, that's enough of that because it's never going to happen. And we just, stopped. That was it. But this visualization, she actually had me think about what my ideal life could be like. If I could have anything I wanted, if I waved a magic wand, what would it look like? And I started to visualize a different life than I had in that moment. And I started visualizing myself differently, a version of myself who loved herself, who was, super proud of herself and all this kind of stuff. And then a bigger house and travel and more money and all these things. And then she had me feel the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That's not the language she used in the visualization, I don't think. But she said, how do you feel when you have all this? And I had tears streaming down my face, absolute tears. And I got off that call and I was like, that felt so real. That felt like me, the real me. experiencing that. Like, what just happened? And so what I understand now was that was the first time in many years that I tapped into the like awake dream state where I experienced something in my imagination and my physical body had a reaction to it. So that's like the first time I intentionally did it with purpose.
Yeah. Would you say that like, are you someone like, did you have to kind of like train your imagination? Like a muscle?
Oh yeah, totally. Well, first, before I did that though, I started researching it. So I actually started reading more books on imagination, like Awakened Imagination by Neville Goddard is one of my favorite books. I read that. And then I read Your Invisible Power by Genevieve Behrend. And she has this chapter, The Order of Visualization. And I started gathering the evidence for myself as to why visualization was so important and why I should start to use it and practice it and create this skill. So I had to it was like, what's in it for me? I had to understand it. And those two books were pivotal for me in really creating a case for why I should give this energy. Then what I did is I found myself, sitting there kind of mindlessly trying to think of like, okay, what am I going to imagine? I don't know. I don't even really know what I want. And, it became a bit of a block. So what I did is I created scenes. And this is something that I came up with myself. I was just like, you know what? I would love to have a tool that I can use for myself and then help with clients. So what I always teach is to create these end scenes. So they're scenes that you visualize that can only happen if your goal is achieved.
Right.
So if my goal is to go on a trip at this certain beach and this certain resort, and it's one that's like 4 times more money than I can afford right now, but I want to become the version that does, I have to make sure the end scene is that beach, not just any beach. It's not the beach around the corner in Ontario, like Sandy Beach in the Bahamas. You know what I mean? So it was really beautiful because creating these end scenes allowed me to focus my attention on what I was visualizing, but then also allowed me to feel the feeling of what it would be like to have that thing. So one of my end scenes that I created was taking my family on a trip to Hawaii, taking my girls and telling them, guess what? We're going to Hawaii. And in that moment, visualizing my daughter's reactions to going to Hawaii allowed me to have the emotional response. And so I would visualize that one I had about 4 or 5 end scenes that I would just rotate through. I'm not as mechanical in my visualizations now because I've practiced it. So now I can literally just sit down, think of the thing, feel the feeling of having it, and I'm done in like 20 seconds. But it used to be like 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes before bed, and I would go through these scenes and experience them.
How important do you think like repetition of that imagination work, like that visualization, how important is repetition in the process of manifestation, would you say?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that happen with our visualizations. There is an impact on the subconscious mind. So when you visualize, you're reprogramming your subconscious mind. So if my subconscious mind right now doesn't believe that I can go to the beach in the Bahamas, this 5-star resort, and I keep visualizing it over and over and over and over and over again and feeling the feeling of doing it, I'm convincing my subconscious mind that I am somebody that does that. So then my faith in myself goes up. The belief that I have in me goes up. Then I take different action in life. And so then I've manifested myself on the beach. But I also believe that the visualizations change the frequency that we are operating on or the vibration that we are in. So I think about when I visualize myself being so grateful for the $1 million business that I built. When I come out of the visualization, my body physically now is vibrating there just from going there in my mind. So then it's up to me to hold the vibration in this 3D world to then attract to me the things that are a match to the vibration of the $1 million business. So there's the reprogramming of the subconscious mind where the repetition works, but then it's also the repetition in calibrating your vibration through visualization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we both come from a school of thought that says repetition is foundational, very, very important. But I think we have both learned that it's not as required as we were taught initially.
No.
Like it doesn't take like, we were taught like, you write out goal 100 times and stuff like that. And I know you figured this out. I figured this out. Like you can do it a lot quicker without as much effort.
Oh, yes.
But your faith has to be high.
It does. It does. And it all has to do with feeling. So this is, somebody said to me the other day, they said, Kathleen, you know what I love about your approach? You feel into it. And I was like, hold on, what do you mean? Like, I just hadn't heard that before. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, it's almost like, it's not about doing things, but feeling a certain way. So you feel into it. And I was like, yes, totally. That is so it. That is exactly what we're talking about here. And so, to reprogram a subconscious mind, there's many different ways that you can do it. You and I were taught from Bob, emotional impact or constant spaced repetition. So we would do the constant spaced repetition over and over again. And then I started thinking about the emotional impact one. And I was like, hold on. Usually the emotional impact is some sort of traumatic event, changes us. Somebody close to us passes away. We experience some sort of trauma in our life. Somebody's done something to us that's really bad. It changes us because we have an emotional impact. It reprograms us. So can't we do that in a good way? Like, can't we just be so overcome with joy, happiness, gratitude that we can change ourselves? And so then I started playing around with this idea. So now this is what I mean by like, I don't need to do 7 visualizations in a day for 5 minutes each. If I get really emotionally involved in the visualization, it doesn't matter how long I visualize for. It's the emotional impact. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm crying and I'm happy, then I know I did a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who like struggles with the emotional involvement part, like where they've pretty much, been running their life through mechanical, they're not very emotional people?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like it's a bit of a muscle. And so I have, obviously, I'm attracting more men into my space. And I think it's wonderful and it's beautiful because the masculine energy now knows I would like a bit more feminine energy to be able to do this with more ease and flow. And so the feeling is the feminine energy. And we're not talking about men and women. We're talking about energetics. And so men are used to suppressing the emotional side of themselves because they think that men are strong. Men don't cry sort of thing. And so their feminine energy gets suppressed over time. And so now men are coming to me and being like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And I've had some men that, I'll guide them in a visualization and it's like, I felt nothing. And I'm like, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to slowly try to get you to feel something that's comfortable for you to feel. So it doesn't have to be this emotional crying, I love my life and I love everything. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be a sense of accomplishment. So with someone that's used to the mechanical or the masculine energy a little bit more, I'll say to them, okay, so what would be a word that you would use or an energy that you would feel after you like just scored a goal? It's like, yes. So then we work on that one. So let's take the yes to the, oh my God, I love my life and it's so amazing. And I've seen so many men move through that energy and women too. I'm just using men as example because it's a good frame of reference. But there's been women too where they become blubbering messes after being in my energy for a while. And they're so grateful to me for doing that to them.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I can't even count how many times I've, heard people ask questions like, okay, like what is the like law of manifestation? Like how much time does it take? How many times do you got to write the goal out? How much visualization do you need to do? Is there like a magical, amount of stuff that you have to do to get a manifestation to pop in? And I don't think any of that crap matters except for the feeling. So I think it's literally to the degree that you can feel it as true.
You know what though, Tommy, I agree with what you just said. I agree that you do not need to be so mechanical in your manifestations. Even if you think about the order of visualization. So you picture something on the screen of your mind, you feel the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then it manifests into the physical form. Well, you can actually remove the seeing it on the screen of your mind part and go straight to the feeling. Right. You don't even have to visualize. And so, I think a higher level of awareness, or somebody who has understood this and played around with this and practiced this, can literally turn on a feeling like that of the wish fulfilled, of the future state, of the version of yourself. And this is why I don't do a lot of journaling anymore. I don't do a lot of writing anymore. I don't sit down and do guided visualizations anymore, because I can, in an effortless way, call upon these feelings. And, I used to be somebody that my sensitivity was a limitation. I saw it as a limitation. You're so sensitive. You take things so personal. Now it's like, no, like this feeling, me being so happy, being so excited, me getting emotional, these are all evidence that I am tuned in to the feeling of what it's like to live in the state that I consider to be my ideal state. And so the more love you want to manifest in your life, the more love you need to experience today. And many people will say to me, but how? Like, especially with money, I'm like, all you need to do is feel abundant right now today without having any money. And they say, but how? I don't know what it feels like to have money. So how do I be in the feeling of money today? I'm like, in your imagination. Like, you can literally imagine what it feels like to win the lottery. You can imagine what it feels like to go on an all expenses paid trip to Barbados in a luxury home. You can imagine yourself living in a 10-bedroom mansion on the coast of some ocean somewhere. Like, I mean, you can imagine yourself there. And so that's how you know what it feels like. I think we get too into our intellectual mind. But what I also believe about the imagination, Tommy, is that if you can see it in your imagination, that is evidence that you can have it. It's the proof right there. You would not be able to imagine it if it wasn't possible for you to experience it in the physical world. And that Albert Einstein quote where he says that imagination is more important than knowledge. Okay, we're all on a quest for knowledge. Everybody wants more information. We want to know more. We want to read more books. We want to understand this. We want to be an expert in that and an expert in this. But what he was trying to tell us then, which is so important, is that forget about what you know and go into your imagination. These people that were the first ones to become aware of things. We call them inventions, people that invented things. Nobody invented anything. The ability to have electricity, to have lights that work, the ability to drive in cars, to fly airplanes has always been here, and it's always been available to all of us, every single one of us. But it took somebody that was willing to live in their imagination instead of according to what they see, to bring it into the physical world for all of us to be able to access. So it's literally just becoming aware. And so, the Wright brothers, I remember reading where the one brother said to the other one, like, why are you so convinced we're going to be able to do this? And he said, because I see myself flying that plane, the wind in my hair up above in the sky. And so if I can see it in my imagination, I know I can have it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that Bob used to say, and I may not say it precisely correct, but it was something about, because people would ask him, like, well, like trying to push the limits of like the teaching and say like, well, what about, I can imagine myself like, flying by, Saturn, but am I capable of doing that? Like, and he would say, well, you won't seriously want something that you're what did he say? You won't seriously want something that you're not capable of visualizing. So like, basically, I can imagine what it would be like to, base jump into a volcano rim. I don't really want to do that though. But if I did, I could manifest that.
Well, and what would be missing if you don't really want to do it? So if you visualize yourself base jumping and it's not something that you really want to do, you're not going to have this euphoric emotional reaction when you visualize it.
Yeah.
So no, of course you're not going to bring it. But when it's something I want, it's something I desire, it's something that I would love, when I visualize it happening, I have an emotional response because it's me actually doing it.
Yeah.
And the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a past memory, what's happening today, and your imagination. So most people are using their imagination to recreate past memories over and over and over again. Or you're imagining worst case scenarios. So if you are somebody who is afraid of driving on the highway, for example, you've imagined how busy the highway is. You've imagined yourself afraid at the wheel. You've imagined yourself maybe getting into an accident. And so now when you go to take action to get on that highway, you're like, I can't do it. No. So you've used your imagination to create something. And it works. What you did worked. That's manifestation. But you're not consciously and intentionally creating what you want. You're doing it in the opposite way. So visualize yourself on that highway, comfortable, relaxed, loving it. You're weaving in and out of lanes and it's not that busy and you get to the destination safely. And you do that a few times, you will be able to drive on a highway. I 100% believe that.
Yeah, that's so funny you just went there because that's where I was going to take us next. Is, so the imagination is our, probably our most powerful, miraculous tool that we have that's responsible for everything great that any human has ever achieved. But it's also responsible for everything horrifying that anyone's ever achieved. Or, you know what I mean? Like, so really it's our biggest tool, but it's also could be like, our biggest enemy too. So I was going to say, let's talk a little bit about the shadow side of it, and you just said, like, most people are using their imagination to imagine outcomes they don't want. And it's such an easy, like, trap to fall into. So
Totally. And I think what ends up happening, right, is we have a collective consciousness. So, our individual consciousnesses feed into the greater one. And so when we want to say that this person is wrong and this person does bad and they do things that we don't understand, we must also understand that it is a outcome of the collective human consciousness that created that. That's a lot of minds thinking about negative things to make some of these negative things feel normal. It's almost normal for us to hear these high numbers of murders in cities. It's not all that shocking anymore. And it's because it's part of the consciousness now that for one human to hurt another human is not that bad of a thing. Like, I don't hold that consciousness. I don't understand it, but I do understand that it is an outcome of the collective. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of people that have distorted ways of thinking. People who are living in fear much more than necessary, people that are hearing the news that talks about negative things all the time, has us seeing the negative. So the important thing for me is to make sure that I'm using my imagination in the best possible way for me, but I also use it for others. So I really believe I'll do visualizations where, there's more peace in this world. I'll do visualizations where, somebody who maybe is having a really, really bad time in their life is feeling better. Like, I really feel like if we all start thinking about each other in a different way, we can impact. So it's not only about my own interests, but also other people's interests and how we can raise and elevate the collective consciousness. Mm-hmm. More people thinking positively drowns out some of the negative consciousness.
Yeah. And I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably someone who's already, using your manifestation or using your imagination rather, for your own betterment. So you probably, have an awareness of yourself and how you're using your imagination. But in case you're not, at the very least, use what you've heard in this episode to allow yourself to at least not let your imagination run wild in a negative direction, steer it in a more positive direction for what you want.
Absolutely. And you know what, Tommy, I'll just take you back to what I was first talking about at the beginning of this episode. I was talking about how when I was a little girl and when I was a teenager, I would create these dreams before I laid in bed at night. And I stopped doing that because I started thinking about all the crap. But I do this every night in bed now, intentionally on purpose, and it feels so good. As soon as my head hits that pillow, I just start making things up in my mind of what I would love to happen the next day, the next year, what I would love to happen in my business with my girls, where I would love to live. I am really, really doing the work right now and thinking about a home on the ocean. And so now I love the idea of having a home on the ocean where I hear waves crashing as I fall asleep. So now I play, as I drift off to sleep and I'm doing these dreams, I play ocean waves crashing so that I fall asleep literally hearing the sound of what it's going to be like when I live on the ocean. And so now if I want to bring that into the physical, I can't just think about it once or twice, but now this is going to become part of my imagination all the time. The more I imagine it, the more I feel it, the more I experience it, the faster it'll come into my physical world. It's inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another cool thing that you can do too, and maybe we can talk about this just to wrap up, you learn almost as much from using your imagination against you, and then the manifestations that come from that. You can learn from those just as much as you can from the positive ones. So, I mean, what's your thought about that, Kathleen? And, our whole last episode was about basically several stories of you using your imagination for yourself and how that turned out. Do you have any stories about where you've used your imagination against yourself and how it turned out and what you learned?
Listen, okay, we don't have enough time for this, but maybe we'll do it on another episode. There's one thing that many of us will say. And when you say this to yourself is an indication that you manifested it, okay? So when you say, oh, I thought that was going to happen, or I knew you were going to do that, or I knew that was going to happen, you imagined it. You maybe didn't consciously say, I would love this, visualize it on purpose. But the fact that you anticipated the realization of it says you manifested it. So anytime that you say that, you know that it's something that you did. And so I would say, oh my gosh, I'm so powerful. I build the evidence of my power in the good and the not so good.
Yeah,
for sure.
Totally. Yeah. Well, that's good. We can do a whole episode about that.
Yeah, I think that would be a great episode.
Yeah, me too. Okay, well, why don't we wrap this one up? Any final thoughts on imagination?
This was so surface level. I have taught on imagination for hours. So, if you want to learn more, maybe tap into some of our live events or whatever. Like, just get into our energy a little bit more, and we can teach you a bit more. But those 2 books that I shared will be good resources for you too.
What are they again?
Your Invisible Power by Genevieve Behrend and Awakened Imagination by Neville Goddard.
There we go.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here, for listening. We are so grateful to have this platform. So with gratitude, Kathleen
and Tommy.
And don't forget that the limit does not exist.